We are live.
We are live. So I'll call the meeting to order. And on number 2 on our agenda is our agenda review and minutes from our September 4th meeting. Does anybody have any comments, additions, edits, suggestions to the minutes? And do we have any thing that we want to add to the agenda today? Mayor?
I don't think so.
Okay. Counselor?
Nope, I'll move to approve minutes.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
And that motion passes, and we'll move on to item 3, discussion on the 2025 IGR priorities and the draft of that. And take it away, Ethan.
Thank you, Counselor. Just as an FYI, Catherine Brotherton, she's going to come on down and join us at 1:45 to talk about the number 8A. And so when she gets here, we'll shift to convert that. That's a question I have. Yeah. So, but we'll start out with number 1. So long-term direct funding to cities for unhoused shelter. And so let me take a step back. So this is an update of our priorities document. And as a reminder, every year we put together priorities document and the policies document, and we being the IGR committee, and then you approve that, and it goes to council for review, discussion, and approval. Sometimes it's an iterative process, sometimes it's more linear. And I think with the timing this year, the legislative session starting in the end of January, towards the end of January, we're going to want to have it completed by December, and if not earlier, but I think December's reasonable. And so, I put together this draft for the October meeting, and likely we'll have an updated version in the for the November meeting, and if possible, we will look to approve in November, but it could be the December meeting early, right? Because it's the first Wednesday of the month, and approve, and then we'll have time with council prior to break to then have the entire package reviewed, discussed, and approved. So that's kind of the timeline that we're looking at. And then
so remind me, Ethan, LOC, is it the end of this month or is it beginning of November this year? And we're going to Washington County, right?
The LOC conference?
Yeah.
No, the LOC conference is 2 weeks from now. It's October 14th or
middle of October.
16th through the 19th, and it's in Bend.
It's in Bend. Okay.
Yeah. And I did send out an
Why did I think it was going to be Washington? Because it was in Bend 2 years ago. Yeah, and then Eugene last year. Now we're back to Bend. Yep. I thought we were going to Washington County. No. Okay.
And so for today's discussion, this is a draft. It's just meant to really start continue talking through these, adding more definition, and I'll give updates on all of the items. You can ask questions as we go through on all of the items. Some of them are fairly clear, and we've got policy path forward. Some of them are still being developed internally, but also mostly it's being developed through external work groups and or processes. So good with that? Okay. So on long-term direct funding to cities for unhoused shelter, this is our position, has been our position. And as we shared last time, seeking direct funding to cities from the state of Oregon to address the unhoused crisis. As we've shared previously, Governor Kotek and the House Housing Committee's Chair, Representative Pam Marsh, convened the Sustainable Shelter Work Group, and it's working on drafting recommended framework for the 2025 session. Mayor Venice is on the work group. Staff also is involved on both there's 2 subgroups. One is on how we fund, and one is on what we fund. And their recommendations are going to be due at the end of the month. They're working to finalize those, and so we're in that process. Our intention there is twofold: is to get recommendations that, one, provide eligibility for the types of shelters that the city of Eugene funds and has found to be successful and innovative. And then two is to have direct funding to cities be a pathway for funds and not be restricted to that. Mary, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, no, I think that's, I think that's, I mean, it's an interesting conversation, but the piece I think that is good is I think we've really been heard on the alternate shelter piece. That seems to be getting a good hearing. I'm not so confident about direct allocations to cities. It's pretty focused on counties as being a conduit. But it's, I'm happy to be heard on the other. And there's some.
And we've been, like last week, at the beginning of the week, in this legislative days. And so I was in Salem and I made rounds to speak with different legislators, including Representative Marsh, related to those two priorities. And the first one was pretty much, supportive to say, yes, Catherine, yes, that there will, the eligibility criteria should be expanded. But as the mayor said, I think that the state is really looking at streamlining, to use their terms, the allocation of resources to regional entities. And so we'll continue to work to make our needs understood and advocate for those direct access to state dollars. If I'm going to look at the crystal ball, I think we'll be successful in the first one and probably need to continue to work with our county partner on the second one. So.
Continue mud wrestling.
Yeah. So likely for next IGR committee meeting in first week of November, we will have the recommendations on this and can give you, and ideally we'll have the ability to have a clear priority statement.
Go ahead.
Oh,
No, no.
Thank you, Chair. So would there be any benefit of having a pre-conversation with Lane County before we do this? I don't know. I'm just asking. I can see it either way.
But Councilor Groves, we've been in conversations with Lane County for a number of years on this topic, and I'm in regular discussion with Christy and with Matt, and I think Sarah is kept informed, because there's a whole number of interjurisdictional or cross-jurisdictional revenue and or payment items that team is constantly navigating. And so this is one element that we keep them informed and say, here's where we think this is going to go. How do you?
Would it be worthwhile to have elected to elected?
I would leave that to Sarah to give comment on.
I mean,
I mean, and I don't have a predisposed.
yeah, I
direction,
think
just
the
asking.
the context in which the county is functioning is HUD dollars, right? And so they're thinking of that continuum of care HUD stream. And so, I think even in this meeting, that's where Kate Budd gets kind of stuck. And what we're asking is let's get out of the HUD constraint because it's not meeting a local need and address that. So I think that's just sticky. I don't think that I have plenty of conversations with Lori and Heather about things. I just don't. I think it's that bigger question of where the dollars come and how they flow through. And I would prefer to get the money directly.
Sure.
But the second best would be to have the state really buy into the idea that these things need to be funded and that it's going to be clear that it's a line item and it goes to the county and the county has to disperse it to us. And I think that language will work, as long as we get the money. without the county sitting on it or pulling away or redirecting it in some way, as long as the state requirements for the county are very explicit about how that money is to be allocated. You know, I think we can work with that. It's getting the county to sort of accept that it can't all go to this narrow HUD definition. I mean, in my best of all possible worlds, the state of Oregon would lead the way. And when I'm post mayor, I would take this to HUD and say, now you need to do what the state of Oregon has done. You need to do all over the country. Right.
I would just add that one of the sticking points that we articulate in these meetings is that currently the state takes general fund or unrestricted dollars and they put that into allocations towards shelter, but they apply HUD restrictions towards them. And so our concern is to say, I mean, we give the example, say a city council with city general fund dollars usually doesn't apply state requirements to how those dollars are utilized because it's much more appropriate for what the local needs are. So we make that case, or we've been making that case because others jurisdictions, because ostensibly that would help with providing the right money for the right need. We'll see where that gets us. Okay. I'm gonna, as I said, we'll switch on over to Catherine Brotherton, city attorney's here to talk with you about House Bill 3115 from 2021. And just I'll give a quick preface to this before I turn it over to Catherine. So as you discussed at your last meeting, and I had shared, League of Oregon Cities had signaled to city lobbyists and cities that they were going to be working on a framework that they would take to the LOC board in October. And at the time they were positioning it as something similar to what they did with House Bill 4002 and Measure 110 from last year. Recently, just about a week ago, LOC pulled together city lobbyists and they said, well, we're going to have a meeting with the board, but we're not going to make a recommendation. We're just going to, they want to have it for discussion and we'll be there to answer questions. And it was very clear that member cities and LOC were, widely divergent in what positions that there might be, either informal or formal. And so, and really what's come out in through that period as terms of options, policy options, as the city of Portland commissioners sent a letter to the legislative leadership. So the House Speaker Fahey, Senate President Wagner, and Governor Kotek, and said, here's what we're seeking. We would like you to do, and it was basically some revisions to 3115 or repeal 3115. And so that's kind of where it is right now. I think at the LOC board meeting for the LOC conference in the next couple of weeks, this conversation will come on up. We wanted to be able to take a little bit of time because at the last meeting there was interest and concern, and I felt it was appropriate for Catherine, and she agreed to be here to just kind of ground in kind of that reality of what 3115 looks like for Eugene, and rather than in other parts of the state. So.
Okay, and I can answer any questions. And so if I'm saying things that raise questions, just ask. I'll try to answer them. So one of the things that I think, just from a grounding perspective, is really important for all of us is that when 3115 was moving towards becoming law, we took a hard look at our prohibited camping code provisions, and the council spent a lot of time looking at those, looking at what was important when it came to managing our public lands, and built the prohibited camping code provisions that you have kind of on a three-legged stool that was based on accessibility, health, and safety. And those three prongs were the consideration for the policy decisions you were making around where camping would be prohibited on public lands and where it wouldn't. And where before we had a very generic kind of camping was prohibited on all public lands. And so using that three-legged stool and evaluating it, we took a close look at, not being within a certain number of feet of a travel lane, not blocking sidewalks, so protecting the accessibility for all of our citizens, being able to access our transportation systems, including multi-use paths. And so it was a 3115 was the genesis of taking a closer look, but what ultimately resulted in is a very thoughtful set of code provisions that were based on these policy decisions of health, safety, and accessibility. So all of that to say that some looking at what Portland has proposed, whether it be the repeal of House Bill 3115 or revisions, I would say that I would not anticipate some tweaks to it or minor revisions to it to actually result in any changes to a very well thought out, very bases code that you made decisions based on health, safety, and accessibility. Repeal is different. And so if you were to think of why 3115 was initially kind of what the bases they said of that was, which was the Grants Pass case that came out of the Ninth Circuit, as well as the Boise case that came out of the Ninth Circuit. And the genesis of 3115 kind of that being the balance of it, which we would be required to comply with anyway, and to which we were complying. House Bill 3115 used that and then also kind of built upon it. I wouldn't say it was limited to those two cases. And so you have the Supreme Court case now that overruled those. And so the question of should House Bill 3115 go away? Now that is the policy of the Oregon State Legislature, regardless of those cases. And so the overturning of that case doesn't mean it has to go away, but knowing that that was the basis of it, it could go away. From a legal perspective, what 3115 does is a home rule authority imposition. And so taking aside what the topic is, taking aside all of that, House Bill 3115 is telling cities, local governments how to manage their public land. And I know that you have taken positions and it's part of your priorities is protecting home rule authority. So having a position from the IGR from the city that is from a home rule authority perspective, and that these statutory positions do impose on our home rule authority and tell us how to manage our lands, that is a very clear path and something very consistent with positions that the city has taken in the past. When it comes to kind of just making some tweaks along the side, I don't see a need for that when it comes to what your code is today, and that the reason and thought and work that was put into it, that the changes to 3115, I wouldn't imagine coming back and having it be a really different discussion or look or ability to do something different. And also I think it's important that 3115, while it kind of was trying to encapsulate those cases, there are a lot of other statutory provisions and case law that actually make up the umbrella of how we manage our public lands and how we are doing any enforcement. There's other statutory provisions that require 72 hours notice before an established campsite is removed in certain, on certain properties and things like that. Those have nothing to do with 3115, but have a significant impact in the way we have and come up with our plans and procedures when it comes to process for encampments. And so, making some changes to 3115 would do nothing to those requirements that already exist, and other case law that's out there. So, and case law, I mean, part of what was a struggle, I'll say, in knowing that they were attempting to codify case law is dynamic. It is, that is. And so anytime you try to codify a case law, we know that it could very easily change. And so that was always the struggle, knowing that was what they were trying to do. Because case law is dynamic. You could have another case with another set of facts that could create other law. And so making kind of changes around the edges to try to anticipate other case law doesn't make a whole lot of sense either. We track that case law, we guide your policy decisions based on that, so.
So my question for you is, are we being consistent with our position and with the LOC as far as retaining our home rule authority is concerned?
Well, maintain.
Based on the Supreme Court decision.
Yeah, we can, I mean, the fact is what the Supreme Court did was overrule the Ninth Circuit's decision. It did nothing to affect that Oregon statute. And so the Oregon statute
The Ninth Circuit decision was over the Boise case
and the grants pass.
and Grants Pass, right?
Right, so really, the Ninth Circuit decision that was appealed to the US Supreme Court was the grants pass case. But the Supreme Court decision actually discussed both the Boise and the grants pass case and addressed both of them, because they really went part and parcel with themselves. Grants pass built on Boise, so there wasn't really a way for the Supreme Court to address grants pass without us talking about Boise. And in fact, I mean, what the Supreme Court decision said in a number of places, or at least two places, was, you know, you can always do more, like Oregon did when they passed 3115. I mean, and so statutorily, so what they were saying was, you know, the Eighth Amendment and these provisions don't provide these protections. That doesn't prevent a state from saying you still have to do X, Y, and Z, which is what Oregon did. So there is from a home rule authority standpoint, the Supreme Court really did nothing other than turn it back to the states. And Oregon, through the passage of House Bill 3115, had kind of already made those policy decisions. They made the policy decisions based on that Ninth Circuit case law, but it was policy decisions nonetheless to codify it. So does that statute, in my opinion, impede on our home rule authority? Yes. Whenever you're telling us how we have to manage our public property, I think that it would be consistent with broader home rule authority and protections to have that go away. But we're just complying with state statute, and we have to comply with state statute. And our code complies with state statute.
So as we approach the LOC later on this month, and we've got municipalities kind of all over the map. And we also have a major change coming up in Portland with the governance system up there. Do we anticipate any change in approach, since, you know, they're the lead sled dog for, you know, the LOC as far as the legislature is concerned? So what happens in Portland kind of dictates to some degree what happens in the rest of the state. I mean, that's an Ethan question.
I think on this issue, that's in some issues that's accurate, and definitely when 3115 was crafted, that was the case. At this point, I think that it's
Man,
we're bringing it to the
for your
table to
crystal
get-
ball opinion in terms of, you know, between now and the first of the year, are we going to, you know, have a major shift in, you know, where LOC and where Portland is going to kind of take the lead on this?
Well, I think between now and the end of the year, we have a major election. And
Well, I
once
know
you get
that,
through that
yeah.
major election, you're gonna have better clarity on who's coming to Salem, what the national outlook is, and then
And the new Portland City Council.
and Portland City Council. And so at that point, I think that, you know, the reason to bring this to you is there was interest, Councilor Groves had asked. We're getting more information, we're sharing that information in real time, trying to keep you, the IGR committee, as the policy body, for city council, related to state elements, updated with the recognition that things are going to change, conditions are going to change between now and the end of the year and the beginning of the session. More information will become revealed, and there may be clear pathways related to policy and a position for the city council. So my recommendation right now is to not take any position on 30, and that at some point in the future get to, and that could be a priority statement, or it could be a broad policy statement that we put into our policy document that gives myself enough latitude to navigate what will ostensibly be a very sticky situation. So that was why I'd asked Catherine to come to give that information and an update. Or I would say not taking a position right now is the best.
Go ahead.
I'm still not clear why that's not the best thing. Again, encroaching on home rule is encroaching on home rule. And it doesn't mean that we as a city can't continue to do whatever we want, but at least it puts the control back in our hands. So if something isn't working, we can adjust much quicker than we can by going to the state to get them to change their law before we can take any local action. So I'm not seeing the upside with not going after this.
Going after this.
Going after a repeal.
A repeal. Well, I'm not sure I'm with you, so I guess that's why there are divergent opinions on this.
If it was
I mean,
repealed,
it's just,
Council vote.
well, and my thing is, is this something that the IGR committee takes back to a council work session at a point in time when it's appropriate for us to have a conversation about this? I would say post-November election, before we, kind of outline what our position is going to be on this.
And we need to know more. I mean, I think what Ethan is saying, this is still a shifting landscape, so it's premature to know actually what it's gonna look like.
Right.
What the revisions will look like. So, and I see Jennifer has her
Yeah,
hand raised.
go ahead, Jennifer.
Thanks, Chair. So I agree with Greg. I think it's probably a little too soon to be bringing this to council, but it's one of those big issues that I think folks are going to want to probably weigh in a little bit. Having it stay in IGR, I think, would not be acceptable to some of our colleagues. So that's kind of how I feel about that. The other thing that I'm reminded is something that Ethan often reminds us is that we can only do so many things. We can only prioritize so many things that are important to us. And it sounds like whether this is changed or removed, it really doesn't necessarily affect what we've already put into place or what we've already spent a lot of time doing. So my only concern about putting a lot of effort into promoting repealing it would be that it takes attention and time away from things that might have more of an effect in our community and might be more valuable to us. So yeah, that's something that I would be thinking about as we're trying to make a decision about how to address this.
and I will say, if I can add the repeal, to speak to Councilor Gross' point, the repeal would, if it was entirely went away, it would turn it back to the city council to decide whether they wanted to make changes to the code. Whereas right now, we are in compliant with the state law, the code that you passed, without some massively substantial changes to it. There wouldn't be new revisions you would be making to it. A repeal could put that policy question back on the desk of the city council to say, do we want to address prohibited camping differently? And so it could have a new policy discussion around that. A full repeal would do that. Again, that would be if the entire thing went away and you wanted to consider it, it wouldn't then be an option to consider it. So that's what a repeal.
But we wouldn't need to consider changes unless we wanted.
Exactly, that's exactly right. It just gives you, right now, we have code in place and it complies with the law. And I mean, similarly to what the legislature will be considering, just because even with the case being overturned, that may be, that's the policy they want. That could very well be the decision of the state legislature. Like, well, whatever, we created the policy we wanted, we used that as a base. But that's our policy now. Similarly, you have code in place. There was a lot of time that you all spent talking about it and what the areas you wanted. The decision could be the state law went away. We don't want to touch this, right? Like, we still like the policy. We actually we have concerns that we want to look at other things. So, but as with the case being overruled, it opens up for the legislature their opportunity to take a look and decide whether they want to keep. Similarly, if 3115 went away, it would open up that opportunity for council if you chose and wanted to maybe to take a new look at it. But it would be entirely your option.
So we'd have an option versus no option.
When it came to, yes.
That's my,
Yeah.
I get you.
Mhm. And that's what home rule authority, that is the thing with home rule authority, it takes that option.
And I, just to kind of provide my political sense on this, is that indeed we do have a policy direction that says oppose any restrictions to home rule authority. And at the same time, this item is complex enough from a community and a policy standpoint that definitely it should be discussed at council, that then council gives direction to IGR committee stance. And
I agree with Jennifer on that. I'd like to see it go to council.
and regarding then council calendar and what would be different than what Catherine just shared between now and December, we'll see more the closer to January yet. And so postponing and even being able to move on into it in January after council winter break could work, right? Because, and then there's just the politics of who was the chief sponsors for this bill and what the impact of the relationship of they are not interested in appealing that and our intention to do that, or there could be political ramifications. And the chief sponsors at the time were Governor Kotek as Speaker of the House and Speaker Fahey as House Housing Chair. So I think that we want to look and what my role to advise IGR and council is to really look at what our overarching goals are across our platform and our agenda, and really try to prioritize in a way where we need to put pressure, where we want to be able to advocate for other items. So I think that's one of the reasons why it's complicated.
Well, and over the last few years with other issues that we have grappled with, particularly zoning and other issues, go back to House Bill 2001, we originally took a stance that was, 7-1, flying in the face of Speaker Kotek and the governor and, everything else, because we wanted to retain, our ability to control our planning processes and governance. And, they kind of whittled us down and worked us back a little bit. And, I think I remember that the governor wasn't too happy with the mayor and the mayor wasn't too happy with the governor.
It was the political price that we paid for several years with our credibility in the legislature. And so I think.
But it's a little different now, Mayor, that Speaker Kotek is the governor, and she has to look at this. She was looking at it from broad perspective from the speaker's point of view, but as the governor, you have to approach things with a scalpel and not a hammer. And I think that she's kind of getting that now. And I'm not sure, I haven't had a conversation with Julie about, you know, where she's going to be pushing and leading us in the direction to, I just would assume that she would be doing what, you know, Governor Kochek is assisting in moving forward on this. So, I mean, you know, that's why we get paid the big bucks. You know, this is easy.
You know, I hear literally daily from people that want us to address the problems, the behavioral issues that are going on in our community.
Yes.
I just spoke to someone on the way here today about that. And I think their expectation is we're doing everything we can to be able to have local control over the problem. That's how I'm interpreting it. But what I'd like to know is, so how much time do you need before the legislature goes into session in January to have a decision from council? So I mean, can't we just schedule something out ahead that gives you enough time, whichever way council goes, to work with?
Yeah, Mike, thank you, Counselor Groves, for that insight and also the question. I believe that with this topic, it will not be a shot out of the gate in January that it's going to get addressed. It's going to percolate for a while. There will be a whole crop of new legislators. This will play out along political lines with moderate Democrats and Republicans, where liberal Democrats may be. And so, and it's part of a whole kind of the process of legislators deciding what their priorities are for their community and their constituents comparatively, and also as a caucus. And so all of that comes to, and then there will be the engagement process of public testimony. And so I would say that this, and Eugene's role in that would be minor. And I would say that that process will play out over the course of a few months, if not the entire legislative session. So I would say if we were to wait until January to have them with council, to have a much more robust discussion to give direction to IGR for a priority or policy direction, we'd be okay.
Back to Catherine's point, this situation is dynamic, and we get to the place that we are now where we're having other states pushing their homeless populations on us.
It's happening now.
And they've been doing it for years, but it's even more ramped up. And we seem to be the epicenter for, you know, hey, go to Eugene. Here's a bus ticket to Eugene. You know, hitchhike to Eugene. It's going to be really difficult for us to be able to craft policy with the legislature that is going to operate effectively with the pressure that we're under right now from our constituents. People are pissed off.
Fed up.
Excuse my language on this, but I hear this, like, you know,
Daily.
Councilor Gross, we hear it daily, you know. I'm afraid to go to the pizza place on 99 because I'm, you know, I'm gonna get an earful of it. Or, you know, to Dairy Mart, people are saying we're closing our doors because of, you know, this situation that we cannot manage. And so, and we don't have any easy answers dropping out of the sky for a municipal response to it. You know, given the interlocking, you know, pieces of county and state that go along with this, that we have to figure out along the way. So I would like to have this discussion with council sooner than later. And I realize that, you know, we have an election first week in November, but I'm not sure when that discussion should happen between the election and the end of our fall session.
Yeah, and I also just want to say you have a very full agenda between now and
I know.
your December break. And so, and this is a big one. It's going to take a full session. So I understand the frustration. And of course, you can always talk to your colleagues and say this is happening. But I think it's going to be, not that I don't want to be at the table for this. I'm not trying to pass, get away from this one. But I do think it's going to make more sense to give yourself time and give us time to get that on a calendar for council and make sure there's plenty of time to do it. Otherwise, we're going to be squeezing it in between other things that you absolutely have to do also between now and then.
I would feel better if we at least got something on the schedule, even if it's January, just so that we've got it and say, yeah, this is when it's going to happen. So we don't get to January and go, oh gosh, it's really busy right now. And then all of a sudden, it's too late. We'll have to wait till the next
No,
legislative
I
session.
mean,
Well, welcome new
That's okay.
mayor.
Yeah, that's not gonna, this is not gonna slide, it's not gonna slide off the radar. You don't get to worry about that, so.
I think it's gonna get worse.
I think that, I mean, and part of that conversation, I think it's important to manage expectations isn't necessarily the right phraseology, but as part of those discussions, because you have so many discussions with people out in the community. If, let's say, if House Bill 3115 was repealed, and then the decisions were, could changes be made to the city, what changes to the city code then would you as a council want to make? And then if more changes were made, what is the expectation and the realistic expectation that would come from changing what's currently in code right now? Because you still have, like I said, you still have other statutory provisions that wouldn't be changed, like the 72 hours for an established campsite. The lack of funding for places for people to go. So some of those other things, I think when you have the discussion about the repeal of 3115, what that would mean is an important part of that discussion. Absolutely. That's why I think when I think of the repeal, I do think about it in terms of home rule authority, not a solution to some of the struggles that our community is experiencing, the unhoused population. And so it really is about giving the authority back, managing our lands. That doesn't address all of those other things that we've talked about and that we know are a struggle, that are contributing to what you're hearing.
Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. In addition to what Catherine is just sharing, I would say that procedurally, if council were to, let's just say tomorrow, council were to direct me to go and work on repealing 3115, we'd first have to find a bill sponsor. And so I'd have to go to our legislators, make a case, and have somebody say, yeah, I'm gonna use it one of my bills, or I'll put it in front of a committee. That process in last Friday, 2 Fridays ago, excuse me, was the pre-session deadline. So for bills to be submitted for legislative council to write up the draft. That doesn't mean that there's not opportunities moving forward, but procedurally at the legislature, we have to get a bill sponsor. We need to then take that to legislative council, get a bill draft, go through that process. And so that may also be happening right now with other legislators across the state, where other jurisdictions or interested parties are approaching those legislators to say, we want you to file a bill. And so right now, LC, Legislative Council, could be writing a bill to be repealing 3115.
There's no place to find out if that's going on or not.
We can ask, but tends to things like that, they'll keep legislators will keep them close to the vest until it's time to drop the bill and make it publicly aware, or seek to get supporters. So so that's the other piece, is that's why I'm advocating for longer that we wait, the more will be revealed, that we can say, let's align with that legislator that has that bill that looks the best to us, rather than trying to put Eugene out in the lead on this right now. So there's that piece, I just want to kind of give the lay of the land. The second part though is that if you do want to schedule a work session, I would like to have the committee take a vote and give me direction so I can put it into our minutes and then share that with chief of staff and city.
Let me ask you this other question. Thinking about it. Would it help for us to have a conversation with Mayor Drotzman at LOC? I know he's gonna be the outgoing president, the incoming president is Mayor Engelke of North Bend. And I know that Dave is a pretty moderate Republican. So, and I know he just lost his Senate race up there. So, you know, he's not going to be in the legislature, but he's going to be immediate past president this coming session. And I don't really know Jessica that well, but you know, I know Stovall, I know Drotzman, I know some of the other people. Would it help to kind of get a preview of where the league is looking to, you know, go ultimately on this issue?
I mean, that would be great if you want to reach on out, but in my sense, the league right now, it's really much more what the outcome from the Portland election and
Yeah.
what the new city council, the new mayor, new city council president for Portland then decides to do between the election, end of the election, and then the swearing in January and swearing in with the legislature. I think that
That's what I was figuring.
and so there's probably discussions with the legislators up in Portland who may, and honestly, Portland's in a much different situation and environment than Eugene is at this point.
All the rest of us are different.
Especially related to, and one of their main reasons is that they've been sued. And so, so I would say, you know, as always, speak with your, you know, your LOC colleagues. And I still come back to what Catherine and I think are saying is that if there's a work session on this, we will be fine to look at that in January. And that'll also give staff time to prepare for a fairly large complex. I mean, it's taken up a lot of time with just 3 counselors and the mayor.
I know we need to move on, but Mayor, have you talked to Callaway and Drotzman and those guys
No,
about any of this?
No, I have not.
Jennifer's.
Oh, Jennifer, go ahead.
Yeah, just real quick, I wanted to say, I think this has been a really good discussion. It's really made me think a little bit from what I said at the beginning. I don't know, I think maybe, I assume we have meetings set up in November or maybe December to get back together. Maybe we should sleep on this, so to say. This is a really important discussion in our community. I don't see even the repeal of this making a huge impact on the ground for the average person in Eugene experiencing life. What'll really make an impact is our first discussion was around funding, and I wouldn't want our community to, like Catherine said, get some kind of expectation that things are going to change dramatically should this change, should this particular House bill be repealed, because I just think that's very unrealistic. So having a work session, I think, should be thought out pretty carefully about what it's about and what we're going to actually be discussing, so that we don't end up in that situation where we're expecting something that is never just gonna, it's just never gonna happen. I don't know. I feel like this is one of those things that needs to be done very carefully, and I'm not sure I know the very careful way to do this, if that makes any sense at all.
It makes a lot of sense. Go ahead, Randy.
Jennifer, I think you made a lot of sense there, actually, so thank you for that.
Yeah, I'm totally into home rule. I totally agree with Councilor Groves. The more control we have of our own community always feels better, right? But I don't remember everything in the House bill, I'll be honest. I also think, I don't remember which one of you said this, but expecting cities to be a part of this and it's not just us is important to me as well. And I don't remember if the House bill had things in it that would then leave those other cities to just stop doing stuff.
Well, there's the House bill and then there is ORS 195.53.
Right, yeah, I guess that.
Where it was codified in, but here's what I'm wondering. I understand what everybody's saying about the time isn't right now, but I also know how jammed up we get, how quickly jammed up we get. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't have a prepared motion for next IGR meeting that would call for a council work session
Well,
in January.
what Ethan is suggesting is we can ask for a work session to be scheduled, so then he can put it on the docket and then Brooke will put it on her calendar. So you
Yes.
can do that now.
That's what, okay.
Yeah, you can do that now.
And can I just ask for a quick clarification? Because I mean, the discussion started with kind of a legislative, should we support the repeal of 3115? And I would ask that if you were to have a work session, it be narrow around your support and priorities regarding that. Because as this discussion has, it's so easily morphs into things that actually do not relate to 3115. And that's what makes it hard and to manage expectations because it conflates pretty quick.
Right.
So if we wanna, if it really is a work session that would be to discuss whether or not to support the repeal of 3115, that is a manageable discussion. It's got bumpers on it.
That makes perfect sense. Are the three of us in agreement on that this is reasonable to get this on our agenda to talk about a work session with colleagues?
Yeah, I think that makes sense because Ethan, if there ends up being a lot of tweaks instead of repeal, we could always bump the work session a little if we needed to, right?
I'm just looking for a placeholder because again,
Yeah.
it's not gonna get less busy between now and January.
Sure.
And then, we're gonna have a new mayor and a new council coming on.
Yes.
So, I know they're both paying attention to what we're discussing now, so we really need to be ready to hit the ground running. I would say probably the first council work session in January, we should have this on the tape.
If I might.
If that's appropriate.
Motions in the.
Well, it's, and I think that, I mean, having the direction from this team be regarding the legislation actually it helps have it not seem like it actually should be a regular work session pull under your operating agreements, because it's not a work session about your general policy. It is specific to the legislative session and the position that the council will take. So, that makes a lot of sense.
Do I need to make that request formally
Well, I was,
as the chair?
Well, I think we'd need a motion on the table.
and
Okay.
I drafted one.
So moved.
Go ahead, Ethan. What is it?
Direct schedule a work session after council winter break on the position of the city to repeal HB 3115.
So moved. Second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Bye.
I think that's unanimous.
It all starts with a discussion.
Yeah.
Right, I tell you, it does wander all over the landscape
So,
when you open up that box.
and I know we're at right now at 2:37, so we might want to get back to the part of the agenda that we were working on before. And go to priority item number 2 and then move through that, Ethan. And the next few priorities that we have to address going into the legislative session.
Perfect. So seek funding for Clear Lake Road infrastructure is number 2. Requesting, and this is what we requested last year, requesting $8.5 million for phase 1 to extend infrastructure to serve economic development, housing, future recreation, and future fire station needs. So that we'll make as a lottery bond request for a capital construction request, and we'll lobby on that as our top priority.
A quick question, is that number still good? Because time value money, I'm sure costs have gone up from what they were when we made that request before. Do we need to revisit?
Good
Not the
question,
number.
Councilor Rose. The number, the total number of the project is still roughly 80 million.
Okay.
And it's probably escalating by minute. by
As we
minute,
sit here?
right? And then it's also what's the appetite? And so
Okay.
I would say that 8.5 million is pretty substantial for the state to give to one jurisdiction. If it was something where we were leveraging additional investment from the private sector then maybe 10 million would be more palatable, but there's really just trying to gauge what their appetite to allocate funds is going to be.
No, we don't want to scare them
And
off.
we're going to need a chief sponsor or supporter on this, and it is in Senator Manning and Speaker Fahey's district. So we're hopefully going to be able to gain their support.
Thank you.
Been having those conversations already. So number 3 is support increased state investment in behavioral health systems, and mid-October in 2 weeks' time. And in early November, the city council will hold work sessions on behavioral health and substance use disorder systems. And, I'm working with Christy. We're going to be presenting on the first one. I'll be sitting, listening when the second work session goes on. And ideally that, from what the work session poll leaders on that, or Councilors Lanka and Leach, there had been an interest in identifying a potential policy statement or some outcome of what the city could do. And so I think that, again, as we get through those work sessions, we get better clarity from council that then we can put on into here that might look different other than a broad, we support behavioral health investments. Support increased protections related to threats to public officials. I did put onto your tables Senate Bill 92 from 2013, and this item we needed to move quickly, and so I requested Senator Brzezinski's office, and he said yes to submit this bill to be rewritten and reposted for this next legislative session. And he was a supporter of it back in 2013. So and in the act, it would, from the summary of it, creates crime of threatening public official, punishes by maximum of 1 year's imprisonment, $6,250 fine, or both for first offense, and maximum of 5 years imprisonment, $125,000 fine, or both from subsequent offenses. And when it was first seen, it made it through its initial policy committee, and then it went to Senate rules where it was not moved. And so we moving this bill back again and seeking support. Number 5, secure authority for local governments to prohibit firearms in public buildings. And so Metro is leading this in 2025. This is an existing policy position that the city has had in the past. And so House Bill 2007 from 2023. And again, it gives a definition of what it would do. And we came on in today, Councilor Evans asked, like, well, can't we just restrict firearms? And so as an example, there's magnometers outside here. If somebody comes in with a concealed handgun permit and the magnometer goes off, they say, I've got a concealed handgun, and they can bring it on in. And you're not, city code would not be able to have any restriction on that. And so this would give the city council the ability to say, in a public building like council chambers or in the library, we would want to prohibit handguns. The state, this element has been in firearm restriction guns in the past, and it's been negotiated out. Local governments got negotiated out in previous versions. The state has that protection for state offices and state public buildings, and also educational institutions. So K through 12, community colleges, the University of Oregon has those protections. And so we would be coming back to say that it's, and it would not be a mandatory, it would be that the local government, the local governing body would choose whether or not they want.
Okay.
And then number 6, improvements on the GEMT. And so I just gave some more information on there. The update that I got from Deputy Chief Heppel was that, because he's I don't know right now, Councilor Gross, do you know if he is the chair for OFCA right now, or is he just on the board?
I don't know.
I think that he had been past chair, he could just be on the board now, but he's working with OFCA, the Oregon Fire Chiefs Association. They've brought the issue to OHA. OHA has agreed with them, said, yes, this is an issue in terms of the efficiency of the system. We can make changes that would improve it, but we can't at the agency level. It needs to be a legislative change. And so I think OFCA is currently working on some bill language, and as I get more information on that, I will share it with you. But generally, I think that any improvements would help flow of funds to CDG.
I have a meeting with Chiefs Heppel and Caven a week from Friday. They wanted to talk to me about that. I think they're looking for some of the history on that.
Right? Yeah. Feel free to invite me. Unless you need do you need the special handshake?
You need special handshake.
Number 7 is seek a minor revision to Senate Bill 1565 from 2022 to support city parking operations. So this one may sound a little bit familiar, because it was last in 2023. We did get an amendment to 1565 in Senate Bill 910. Yet the outcome is that we still needed to take cash and coin onto on-street parking meters, and those have been heavily vandalized, and it's the cost of repairing and maintaining and replacing them is growing. And so what we're going to request from and have this conversation with Senator Brzezinski next Monday is if we can amend it once again to have on-street parking meters be exempt from the cash and coin requirement and just move to digital credit card. And the figures that we're seeing is about 10% of all exchanges are cash, 90% are card. So
I noticed in front of the post office that, you know, they've already converted some of those to not taking coins anyway, right?
well, because of the,
Cause I know I don't carry change anymore, so I just tap my card on the thing, but I noticed it the other day that it's like, oh, you're not taking change anymore?
yeah,
Some of them are being converted over, right? Or is that my imagination?
there's the state,
To taking no cash.
yes, the state law is that they have to take cash. And so if we're not having those, we're not in compliance with state law, it could be sued, and we would lose. So that's why we're working to get it changed so that we can so that our practices can be in compliance with
Be
state law.
allowed with state law.
Back to home rule.
So that we're working on that. We'll see if we can get another revision to that. And then the potential priorities, so checked off number A on the potential revision to House Bill 3115. Housing production, the work groups on housing production are still in effect, and we'll likely see a housing production framework or a housing production package come on out more than likely after the governor releases her recommended budget in December. And at that point, we'll see what she has taken from her agency recommended budgets and incorporated in, and then there may be legislative proposals as well. So we believe there will be something there. We'll continue to be involved in, and if there is opportunity for accessing funding like we did for Crow Road, then we move that into one of our top priorities. And then the transportation package, that's on the legislature's agenda, and the big focus is the sustainable funding for ODOT for their maintenance and also large projects that were approved in 2017, but they haven't been fully funded. And most of those are up in the Portland metro area. And so finding sustainable funding for those projects, what I think our main position, when I've talked to other cities, that we maintain the 50-30-20 split of gas tax dollars, that 50 to the state, 30 to the counties, 20 to the cities, and that any new revenue source that would be provided as a supplemental to that, maintain that same 50-30-20 split. So
two questions along with that is, because, you know, the gas tax is one of the premier, you know, revenue sources for this, and we're getting less in revenue with gas tax, with electric vehicles, et cetera. Is there, you know, when we talk about road user fees, are we talking about tolling in the metro area or tolling throughout the state possibly?
Councilor Evans, I believe that the discussions related to tolling have not been very well received by a lot of the communities up in the metro area, and so they've stopped. There's been a halting of those conversations related to, especially around the I-5 Columbia River Crossing Bridge, related to other types of mechanisms to fund ODOT maintenance, road maintenance, user fee or mileage fee or whatever it may be. Those are to potentially come forward, and that's where our position would be. However it comes forward, we maintain the existing split, so that what I think city's main concern, and this is what I also shared with the speaker when I had a conversation with her in spring, was that you know, we're all for helping the state figure out its financial problems with roads, as long as it does not impact the local government's ability to fund our road maintenance and our needs. And so if there's a shift of that 50-30-20 split, that would produce an impact, negative impact on local governments, and that's where we're very vocal in opposition. So we don't know what it's going to look like.
So do we have anything else for the good of the order?
I've got one thing. So I did send out a and it pertains to the IGR committee as well as council. I sent out an email to mayor and councilors related to the LOC conference annual meeting and a voting delegate. At this point, Council President Keating is going to attend, and he may be in person or virtual, and he can be the voting delegate. Haven't heard anything in opposition to that, and so I think if we and I haven't heard from anyone else that they are going to be going to the conference, participating. So if those things change, then please respond to that email so that we can track that. Otherwise, we'll just move forward with the proposed recommended position, and in terms of the LOC charter amendment, and that we say, yeah, it makes sense, go forward and support it. And then the framework that we incorporated into the memo is guidance for how the city of Eugene representatives should vote for the incoming board members on who would be the incoming board members. That was, I just wanted to remind you that that's in your inboxes.
So you want an actual response? We can't just say here that fine with it.
You can say that right now. I'll take
Yeah,
the note.
I'm fine with that.
Me too.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, keep it simple.
Yeah,
Okay, yeah, so yeah, I think we're good with that.
He just needs to vote the right way.
It's pretty prescriptive at LOC. There isn't a lot of
Just kidding.
lot of opposition to the slate.
So Greg, I just wonder if we need a work session to hear about your trip to Morocco or how we're gonna do this.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Maybe can you be prepared
I
at dinner
can-
before
I
our
can be-
council meeting to give us a slideshow? Let's-
I don't have the official photographs yet, but that's coming. But I will wear my Moroccan garb when I come to council on Monday.
So
Because I promised my son's father-in-law that I would do that.
that's
Maybe we
awesome.
should-
And send him a picture.
Perfect, and I think we should ask Natalie to make sure we have some couscous and roasted vegetables and yogurt. for
By
dinner.
the way, I asked my son's father-in-law, I said, where are the homeless people at? He said, the king doesn't put up
That's right.
with that. I was like, okay, that's not the way we do business in America,
The
so.
question is, what does he do, right? Because,
Would we like to adjourn this meeting?
yes.
Yeah, I
let's-
think
It's probably a good idea.
Yeah, sorry,
I
I
think we're
was
adjourned.
definitely off official business.
Yeah.
Thank you.